What makes you think you can fix this? The voice was sharp, filled with impatience and the subtle edge of disbelief. On the tarmac, the F-16 sat motionless, its nose pointed toward the open sky, engines cold, panels locked in silent protest. Around it, a cluster of young technicians in pristine flight suits hustled, their faces taut with frustration, eyes darting between diagnostic tablets and each other as if their collective expertise could somehow conjure the jet back to life. The sun glared off polished metal, heat rising in shimmering waves, mixing with the scent of jet fuel and the faint tang of ozone. From the edge of the chaos, an old man stepped forward, each movement measured, deliberate. His hair was white, catching the sunlight, his skin weathered from decades under the sun and wind, and his eyes, pale blue, held a depth that made the hurried gestures of the technicians seem frantic, almost meaningless. "Eli Vance," he said quietly, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "General Michelson asked me to take a look." The technicians froze mid-motion, disbelief flickering across their faces as they processed the man before them. His denim jacket, faded olive green from years of service, hung loose, worn at the elbows, pockets holding tools polished smooth by time and use. Lieutenant Wells, the officer in charge, stepped closer, jaw tight, posture rigid, and asked again, voice elevated, "Can you even read the modern systems? This is a Class A jet, one of the finest in the Air Force's fleet." Eli's gaze swept the aircraft, fingers hovering near the worn leather pouch at his hip. "It's not about reading screens," he said softly. "It's about listening. Listening to what the machine needs." The technicians snickered, a short, incredulous laugh escaping, muttering under their breath about old men and toys. Eli moved toward the jet, eyes scanning panels, engine intakes, exhaust lines, small hinges, subtle vibrations, every surface telling him a story the diagnostics could not. He opened the pouch, revealing a collection of small hand tools, each nicked and worn, but perfectly suited for the task. He knelt, fingers tracing seams and panels with a care that seemed ritualistic, almost reverent. A panel slightly ajar, unnoticed by the engineers, caught his attention. He adjusted it with a deft flick, the metallic click resonating sharply in the heated air, a sound that seemed to cut through the hum of confusion. The technicians leaned in, eyes wide, the air thick with anticipation, disbelief, and a hint of awe. A flash of memory crossed Eli's expression, the hum of engines replaced by the roar of a jungle wind, the scent of cordite and damp earth filling his senses. He was back in Vietnam, young again, crawling over the battered Huey he had kept alive with nothing but hands, ingenuity, and quiet determination. The moment passed, and he was on the tarmac again, calm, steady, working in silence. Each connection restored, each panel aligned, every gauge reading normal as if by magic, though no magic had been needed, only skill honed by years of service, observation, and intuition. Lieutenant Wells watched, mouth slightly open, the team silent, the air holding a taut anticipation. When Eli finally straightened, brushing sweat from his brow, the jet roared to life, engines humming a steady, powerful tune, heat rippling off the tarmac, a sound that made everyone stop, frozen, staring at the old man who had achieved what they could not. For a moment, the sun glared on his face, eyes meeting each technician's in turn, pale blue, unwavering, a quiet challenge and affirmation all at once. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, and stepped back, hands empty now but aura of command intact, leaving the group to process the truth. The man before them was not just a veteran, he was a legend. The heat, the hum, the sunlight, even the faint scent of fuel, all seemed to acknowledge the moment, a stillness in the midst of chaos. The technicians standing motionless, a mixture of awe, humility, and disbelief etched onto the tarmac, was quiet now except for the steady hum of the F-16's engines, a rhythm that seemed to echo through the open space, drawing attention to the contrast between the veteran and the young technicians still processing what had just unfolded. Eli Vance walked along the edge of the jet, hands relaxed at his sides, posture calm, every movement deliberate, yet carrying the weight of countless missions and hours spent under the sun, in wind, and in the quiet moments when experience was forged. Lieutenant Wells adjusted his stance, trying to reconcile the years of training he had spent with the undeniable reality that skill tempered by time and observation had created something his instruments and procedures could not. One of the junior engineers, a man barely out of his 20s, leaned forward slightly, unable to hide the flicker of curiosity and newfound respect in his expression, and whispered to his teammate, "Did you see that?" It is as if the jet itself responded to him. Eli paused at the wingtip, glancing up at the sun reflecting off the metal, light scattering in golden patterns across the surface, a subtle reminder that observation and patience can reveal things that precision instruments alone never could. He crouched briefly to inspect a small vent, fingers brushing against the edges with care, aligning what had been overlooked, a simple gesture that conveyed decades of intimate familiarity with the machinery he had commanded in his youth. The younger crew watched, some shifting weight from foot to foot, others standing rigid, silent, absorbing the demonstration of mastery without words. Lieutenant Wells cleared his throat, voice low, trying to maintain authority yet tinged with awe. "How do you know what to check without a readout?" Eli's eyes met his, pale blue and calm. "Experience," he said simply, watching, listening, and understanding the language of the machine. The tarmac seemed to hold its breath, the heat rising in soft waves, mixing with the faint scent of jet fuel and ozone, emphasizing the stillness around them. Eli reached for the leather pouch at his hip, removing a small tool with careful precision, the metal worn smooth, polished by decades of use. Each nick a story, each curve a memory of work done under pressure, under expectation, under circumstances that demanded quiet judgment and unwavering attention. He adjusted a panel behind the intake, subtle movement, almost imperceptible, yet the alignment now perfect, the machinery responding with a low vibration that harmonized with the F-16's engines. The technicians watched in stunned silence, realizing that their combined hours of study, instruction, and practice had not prepared them for the intuitive understanding displayed by a man whose knowledge had been earned through decades of hands-on service. Eli straightened, taking a step back, surveying the aircraft as if reading it, noting the subtle gleam of metal and the faint warmth from the engines, a quiet satisfaction evident in his posture. Lieutenant Wells and the rest of the team remained still, the usual chatter and confident assertions absent, replaced by an almost reverent acknowledgement that the demonstration before them had exceeded every expectation and redefined the parameters of skill and competence. Eli's gaze swept across the team, lingering briefly on each face, pale blue eyes steady, unflinching, silently communicating the lesson that mastery is measured not by manuals or software, but by observation, patience, and experience. The afternoon sun glinted off the jet, casting long shadows across the tarmac, and the hum of the engines carried a cadence of readiness and quiet authority, a tangible acknowledgement of the veteran's influence and capability. Eli adjusted a small lever near the cockpit, smooth, precise, and subtle, the kind of motion that seemed ordinary yet reflected decades of understanding. The result immediate. All systems stabilized, gauges aligning perfectly, the aircraft now fully responsive, a living testament to expertise honed through observation, service, and disciplined care. The technicians remained frozen, absorbing the demonstration in silence, minds recalibrating, respect solidifying, and a recognition settling in that the man who had walked onto the tarmac alone carried knowledge and authority that no briefings, simulations, or manuals could convey. Eli finally stepped away, allowing the F-16 to settle into its idle hum, a low vibration through the asphalt, leaving the younger crew with the undeniable truth of experience, presence, and the quiet power of a veteran who had seen the sky, understood the machine, and commanded respect without a word. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting a warm glow across the tarmac and elongating shadows that stretched from the F-16 to the edges of the airfield. Eli Vance remained near the aircraft, hands resting lightly at his sides, observing the instruments and the subtle vibrations running through the fuselage, as though ensuring every component was aligned with both precision and purpose. Lieutenant Wells and the young technician stood quietly, the tension from earlier giving way to a profound respect, each one internalizing the demonstration in different ways, some with awe, others with a newfound humility. Eli moved deliberately to the landing gear, inspecting bolts and panels with careful attention, fingers tracing surfaces that seemed ordinary but were full of nuance, adjustments imperceptible to anyone without his experience, and yet critical to the balance and readiness of the aircraft. The soft hum of the engines mingled with the distant sounds of the bass, a background rhythm that underscored the authority and calm confidence of the veteran. He knelt briefly, checking alignment, then straightened and let his gaze sweep across the assembled team, pale blue eyes steady and observing, a subtle but unmistakable measure of attention that demanded respect without a single word spoken. Lieutenant Wells felt the weight of what had just unfolded, a quiet lesson in competence, patience, and insight, recognizing that manuals, diagnostics, and technical knowledge could not substitute for lived experience and an intuitive understanding of complex systems. Eli moved toward the canopy, his hands tracing edges, adjusting panels with movements that were both precise and deliberate, embodying a mastery of mechanics and situational awareness honed over decades, each gesture conveying confidence and a quiet expectation that the young technicians absorbed the lesson through observation. A slight breeze stirred, carrying the scent of hot asphalt and jet fuel, emphasizing the stillness and focus that had settled over the tarmac. Each young engineer aware of the gravity in the veteran's movements and the unspoken authority in his presence. The engines vibrated with a steady hum, almost in dialogue with Eli's hands, as if acknowledging the guidance they had received from someone who had lived through decades of service and responsibility, someone whose understanding of machinery, environment, and timing went beyond words and instructions. Lieutenant Wells adjusted his stance, realizing that the lessons imparted were as much about observation, patience, and presence as they were about technical skill, and that the calm confidence displayed carried a force that reshaped the team's perception of expertise. Eli straightened fully, stepping back and surveying the aircraft and crew, letting the sun catch the worn edges of his leather pouch and faded olive jacket, each scratch, crease, and mark a silent testimony to years of diligent service. The young technicians exchanged glances, absorbing the weight of what they had seen, recognizing the authority that comes from experience and the power of quiet mastery, and understanding that respect is earned, patience is measured, and skill is a combination of knowledge, intuition, and presence. Eli took a final step away from the aircraft, leaving the F-16 humming steadily beneath the warm afternoon light, the team still frozen, each aware of the lasting impression that would remain long after the sun had set, a silent acknowledgement that the demonstration had been more than mechanical. It had been a lesson in mastery, observation, and the quiet command that comes only from years of service, leaving an indelible mark on every mind present and a sense of reverence for the depth of knowledge and authority displayed without a single word having been raised in anger or boast.